Telling stories is a part of human nature, and the way I like doing this, if you haven't already guessed, is by using my camera. Although it took a while, I finally developed, shot, and released my first documentary, The Wordsmith. And this video is going to be a breakdown of my entire process. I'm going to go over what I did, what I learned, and in the end, I hope this pushes someone to get out there and start their documentary journey as well. Also, the inspiration behind this was the one-day doc contest by the Art of Documentary, so yeah, I filmed this under 24 hours. First thing was finding a right person. Because I decided to join the competition a little bit late and with no subject, my best and only bet was to put an ISO on my Instagram and hope someone would reply. Looking to future projects, I'm going to find these subjects by doing research on the concepts and topics I find interesting, looking through local news and blogs, and simply asking around in my network. Going back to my ISO, luckily I had a lot of people approach or DM me back, and with everyone, I asked them to send me a quick voice note on what their idea for the doc would be and why they were a good fit. I then booked a discovery call with my top 3 people to figure out what the topic was, what the potential story could look like, what they wanted to do with this, and their comfort level in being on camera. In the end, I went with Marcos because he had a great story to tell, and even more importantly, it was at the very right time for both him and me. On top of that, I worked with Marcos before, so that just made the whole process easier. Getting on the same page with your doc subject is crucial, so once I selected Marcos, we booked a call ASAP to brainstorm and develop the story. This helped build a solid foundation on everything we talked about going forward, and the next thing to do was to find a physical journey that complemented the emotional inner journey, because that's how stories are made. We also briefly talked about locations and additional characters that could appear within the documentary. Figuring out the visual style was my favorite aspect of prep, and I did that through mood boards, references from other documentaries, and music samples. A major tip in doc filmmaking is being accessible to your subject, if possible, and I didn't really understand that until I realized Marcos lived 2 hours away from me. Moving on to the scout, I took pictures, videos, and had conversations with Marcos on the significance of each place. In an amazing way and not so amazing way, I got so much information that I got super overwhelmed. Luckily, I called a fellow AODer and friend Kelsey to talk this through. And a big shout out to her for guiding me through this entire journey and becoming my story editor. With all the info I got, I worked on creating a detailed storyboard. This covered all the scenes we had planned, my notes for direction and dialogue, shots I needed, and reference pictures. Basically, this was going to be my Bible for the shoot. And to get it out of the way now, let's talk about equipment real quick. Everything was shot on the Sony ecosystem. This is because I love Sony and matching in post is a lot easier, but also because there's no budget in this production. I did think about renting some cinema glass, but because I was basically solo and the day was going to be a rush, I opted to stay on my 24-70. For the shoot in general, I was supposed to have a couple more hands on set to help with lighting and sound, but unfortunately they couldn't make it in the end, so it was just Casey and I. But thank you again, Casey, for coming through, because that extra hand helped a lot. The shoot day itself started at 4 a.m. by driving down to meet Marcos at the pier for sunrise, where I got some B-roll and verite interviews to warm up. After that, we went back to his place to set up for the car shots. This took a lot longer than expected because instead of renting a car mount, I chose to save money and get something off Amazon, which in hindsight wasn't the smartest move. Once we got the car rig set up, we shot the interviews and the B-roll for the opening car scene of the doc. This was all naturally lit. We just positioned the car and subject, so I was always filming on the shadow side of the car or Marcos. After that, we shot the scene in his dad's garage where he shows his trophies and introduces the goal and a bit of his backstory. How I lit the scene was mainly natural lighting. I did use a low power Amaran light and just bounced it off the roof to gain levels. Wasn't the most powerful one, but it did help and I was low on time. Once we wrapped that location, we then headed to the coffee shop to show Marcos beginning to write the script and diving deeper into the conflict. Again, all naturally lit. After a quick lunch, we headed back to the house and filmed the scene with his dad in the kitchen. This was something that kind of just happened in the moment, so I didn't really prep for it. I just let them talk and see what came out of it. Lighting wise, I quickly set up my Amaran F22C, which is this flex panel right here, to motivate the lighting coming from the windows. After shooting some scenes in the town, we went over to the beach for the ending scene. And shout out to Sony's 12,800 ISO for this, because without that, I would not be able to shoot the scene because of how dark it was. Once the beach was done, we went to Marcos' house where we filmed upstairs in the studio. I lit this by bouncing my 300X into the side room and bouncing the light back in. I have to say it wasn't my first option, but of how tired we were and how late it got, it ended up being simple and effective, and with that we wrapped a 17 to 19 hour shoot day. One thing I learned from the production day was to keep it simple, and because there was so much that didn't go exactly as planned, I knew I had to piece the story together slowly in post. Before I even started looking at the footage, I created a transcription to work on a paper edit. I had a lot of dialogue, and by a lot, I mean 25 pages worth of it. I went through each scene a bunch of times and bolded the parts of the dialogue which best fit the story I wanted to tell. Based off that, I created my first rough cut and sent it to my story editor, Kelsey. She watched it and I got a 9-minute voice note with a lot of crucial feedback, specifically on how to fix up the structure. On top of that, another challenge I faced in the post process was that I lacked B-roll footage. I did think about filming more, but because Marcos lived over 2 hours away, I opted to work with what I had and use his great speaking ability to my advantage. Through the course of a couple weeks and a lot of revisions, I was finally at picture lock. Although it was really tough to edit, it felt really good to see it come together piece by piece, and at the end, end up at a version that's not technically perfect, but something that I'm happy and proud of. Now that the story was there, I still wanted to stack my advantages and get it colored professionally. So as soon as I had picture lock, I went over to Jesse's place to start coloring. Like I've said multiple times before, he's an incredible colorist and he made this doc look enhanced and elegant. Not to mention, this guy came through and colored it in 72 hours. Coloring is done, but I'm not going to stop there because I had access to people who could make it sound a lot better as well. I had my friends Santi and Hashim handle post sound. Meanwhile, my composer Josh created the music for the first couple scenes of the doc. I would have asked for more, but luckily within the doc, I had enough diegetic music through Marcos playing the piano and guitar. Besides that, I got an amazing track for the ending through Artlist. And if I didn't say this already, post-production saved my documentary. And after it's been maybe 3-4 months, I'm filming a lot later, but yeah, it's been 3 or 4 months and the documentary is done. I'm thrilled to say that, well, first of all, I'm here, I'm alive, and back to normal. And the only reason that I was able to get through this whole process and struggle was because of the people that were helping me. And on that note, here are 3 things you should take away from my entire experience. First one is to have good time management skills. That means to plan, be able to adapt, and cut your darlings when needed. The second being hire your weaknesses. If anything, this proved to me that directing isn't my strong suit, cinematography is. And lastly, when stuff goes wrong, and it will, embrace it, learn from it, and lean on the valuable assets you have to make the things you're proud of. I have no idea how long this video is right now, but I hope my breakdown of this entire process helped you in any way. And if you haven't already, make sure to go watch the documentary because it's my first one.